speed, resolution, autofocus. Legends foretold in 2021, when these three elements reach their peak, they come together to form the One. Now, in 2025 comes the next step in its evolution. This is the new Sony A1 Mark II. This has
30 frames per second burst with pre-capture and speed boost.
50 megapixels with a new noise suppression processor.
8.5 stop in-body image stabilization.
AI autofocus with auto subject detection.
4-axis multi-angle LCD screen.
And still, 8K 30 frames per second in 10-bit 422. Wow, okay, not a whole lot of fanfare with this one. I mean, to be fair, the first original A1 was truly groundbreaking, but a lot of the initial specs that we are seeing right now for the Mark II, they're very similar to the first model, and if it's anything new, it's actually stuff that have already been introduced in other cameras, like the ZV-E1, the A7R5, and especially the A9 Mark III. And I would argue the A9 Mark III really took all the wind out of the A1 Mark II's sails because of that revolutionary global shutter. Which really sucks because the A1 Mark II is freaking good. Still the flagship, still the top of the line camera, and still nothing comes close to it. But unfortunately, we're just too used to the really big announcements and big tech upgrades that it's hard not to feel that this is a moderate update. Not a micro update, mind you. I'm just saying it's not a monumental one, which the A1 should be. So while on paper it seems like a minor update, there are a lot of hidden improvements that become very apparent when you're actually using the camera. So let's get into what they are, shall we?
Speed.
So kickstarting with speed, still 30 frames per second, no blackout frames when shooting compressed RAW. We are of course talking about photo bursting, not video frame rates here, but now we have two new accompanying features, pre-capture and continuous shooting speed boost. The latter's name being so long that Sony had to do some ridiculous abbreviation that I swear looks like someone's cursing at me in the comment section down below. Both are meant to aid with specific types of photography that involves a lot of split-second reactions. But continuous shooting speed boost is a feature that overrides any of the 4 continuous shooting mode that you're in and shoots the full 30 frames per second. You can of course modify the amount of frames, but this is nice for when you don't often need to do the full 30 frames per second. Let's just say you're shooting 5 frames per second, the lowest, but then just something happens out of nowhere, you engage the speed boost and bam, full 30 speed ahead. Now my only complaint is that I wish it would override all the drive modes here. See, if I'm in single shooting mode and I try activating the speed boost, it won't work. When something fast happens out of nowhere that catches me off guard and I'm in single shooting mode, there will be only one acronym that I'll be using. But out in the real world is where any camera needs to prove their worth. Oh my God. We are at the zoo.
You mean wildlife photography simulation?
So the goal here is to get a bird about to take flight. Pre-capture, one of my new favorite features, will save several frames from just before the shutter button is fully pressed. I have slow reaction times, terrible hand-eye coordination, so of course by the time I push the button, I would miss the critical moment.
Oh, there's one right there.
Oh, come on. One of the world's fastest camera that can capture pretty much at anything.
Oh, there's another bird.
And I'm still missing the shot. Did I get it? So this is a huge improvement for all of my fellow spray and prayers. We can actually program the pre-capture to where it would add divider frames in between each bursting session, and it would automatically star the shot from when the shutter button was pressed. That saves hella time sorting through a bunch of crap. So if you can wrap your head around this, this is when I press a shutter, and bam, here's my winning shot.
Success.
Of a tiny little bird.
No global shutter.
All right, addressing the elephant in the zoo, the A1 Mark II does not have global shutter. And I know some of you guys will be disappointed by that, and I am not gonna get into all the technical mumbo jumbos. My channel focuses on real world user experience from both pro and non-pro standpoint. So here's my very Vong guess. Sony wants the A1 series to be a no-compromise flagship camera, and including global shutter might affect the dynamic range and reduces the low-light performance, as we've seen from a few A9 Mark III reviews.
Making a change like that usually sacrifices dynamic range.
The ISO range can't be expanded as much.
We're going to talk about why.
Or wait for an A1 II.
Not bashing on the A9 Mark III, it's a phenomenal camera, but this is where you kind of have to pick and choose. 24 megapixels but 120 frames per second bursts, or 50 megapixels but only 30 frames per second bursts. Both will fill up your cards faster than you can blink. But keep in mind though, 30 frames per second is already ridiculously fast. It was just the start of 2024 that we got the A9 Mark III bursting at 120 frames per second. With that, you will never have to worry about missing the most critical of moments. Not to mention, A9 Mark III and its global shutter, you can shoot with flash at any shutter speed and you'll have zero banding, zero warping, and zero rolling shutter. But the starting ISO is 250 versus 100 on the A1 Mark II in photo mode, and in S-Log3 video mode, the A9 Mark III starts at 2000 versus 800 on the A1 Mark II. Now, I'm not trying to say one camera is better than the other, that's dumb. My whole point is that there is a very clear and distinguishing line between the two. So choose the one best for your job. And if your job wants more megapickles, A1 Mark II, baby.
Please stop saying megapickles. Resolution.
Still 50 megapixels, still way more than enough. What I love about my OG A1 during my travels is that I can always get away with heavily cropping into my images while still retaining amazing quality. Right now, me and Vivian are out on a casual stroll around the park, no particular agenda, but oh, wait, what's that? A horseback archery event?
Keisha is the art of horseback archery.
And would you look at that? I have the A1 Mark II and the 70-200 G Master Mark II in my hands. What a coincidence. Now, unfortunately, none of us have media passes, so we're stuck all the way in the back in the audience zone, but let's see what we can do with 50 megapixels.
Ugh.
Now, the archers need to shoot targets while riding on a horse at full gallop.
That's a lot of pressure.
It's a lot of pressure. For me, right?
For them.
Pre-capture enabled, speed boost engaged, tracking autofocus locked on. Here we go. Zoom in enhance, the arrow leaving the bow, the arrow piercing the first target, the arrow shattering the clay bow. Damn, what a sport. So this is already at 200mm and have so much clutter in my frame. But this is what we will end up with after some cropping and some editing.
Sharp as an arrow. Low light.
Now hidden behind the 50 megapixel is the updated Bionz XR processing engine, so we're supposed to be getting about a stop better images in the mid to high ISO ranges, which is pretty good, especially when you do need to raise the shutter to shoot any sort of indoor action stuff like sports. You now have some extra wiggle room with the ISO. So naturally, I have to test this out at a concert.
Thank you, Taylor Jackson.
Shoutouts to Taylor Jackson for hooking us up with a photo pass to Intervals, an instrumental progressive metal band from Toronto. Shame we don't have the budget to license their music. Now, any concert photographers know the challenges of not only having to deal with concert lighting, but also juggling shutter speed and ISO to make sure we're getting the sharpest shots while keeping the noise and grain to a minimum. Which can be a challenge when the band members are vibing hard to the music. But taking a look at the A1 and A1 Mark II side by side, we are definitely getting a lot more details and seemingly less noise on the newer model. The hair and the beards are more defined when comparing both shots at ISO 8000, and skin tones are way better handled on the A1 Mark II in these trickier lighting situations. And these are straight out of camera JPEGs, by the way.
Thank you so much for your attention this evening, we appreciate it.
And what I'm also impressed with is the new noise reduction composite RAW feature. So we can shoot 4, 8, 16, up to 32 shots in high ISO handheld. Then take it into the Sony Viewer app and merge them together for a clean shot. So here's the first of the 32 shots at ISO 32,000 next to the composited version, and just Wow, even in areas where you can't make out the image like this truck right here, it's very apparent in the cleaned up version. Now, it's not like it's bracketing different ISOs. It was the same 32,000 ISO in all 32 shots. No tripod, just handheld. And it's all being compensated by the 30 frames per second speed, and we're gonna get into this soon, the 8.5 stop in-body image stabilization. So the framing wouldn't be too different when you do 32 shot composite. It's also supposed to account for moving objects, and I think it did a great job for the most part with the cars and people, but there can still be some slight room for mishaps. But I mean, come on, this is great. The merging process does take some time, but it can spit the results back out in either TIFF, JPEG, and AXR, which is a form of Sony RAW, so you can do additional post-processing later. But oh yes, 8.5 stop in-body image stabilization, 0.5 more than the A7R5, which I've been enjoying doing long exposure handheld with, and I can get away with using a slow shutter speed as slow as 4 seconds.
Wow. Anyways, AI autofocus.
Still 759 phase detection autofocus points, but there are some improvements. For example, phase detection autofocus can now work up to f22. Yeah, I can see a very narrow aperture of people out there rejoicing. For the rest of us, we're gonna be happy with some new focus options. The extra small and extra large focus points and a fully customizable focus area box. Now, I would prefer to call it focus window because you can really make it as big as you want, but also very limited at the same time, if you know what I mean. And yes, the A1 Mark II has the processor now that has the AI autofocus and AI subject recognition. They couldn't really add that to the original A1 via firmware because it doesn't have that AI processor. At least that's what they said, which fine, I'll accept that. For humans especially, it can now recognize the subject even further away compared to the original A1. Vivian here is a tiny little dot, and the human autofocus box is still on her. But where the AI autofocus really showed its colors for me was at the Meadow Band show. When shooting with the A1 and A1 Mark II side by side, the Mark II can recognize their faces in the dark way more often than the original. And the difference was, dare I say, astounding. And now it has auto subject detection, meaning you won't have to select animal, bird, car, bug specifically just for the autofocus to kick in for those specific subjects. The camera will now automatically know once you start pointing at them. Though it could still take a moment to trigger, but once it does, it will form a tracking box on them. Now, in my experience, if any object has some sort of defining shape, it would put a tracking box on it. Wow, look at that, Coke autofocus. But I would still highly recommend choosing a specific subject and really narrowing down your focus area for the sharpest results.
Video.
Unfortunately for video, no new resolution nor frame rate options on the new A1 Mark II. Still 8K 30p, 4K 120p with that slight 10% crop, 4K 60p, 1080p 240, all available at 10-bit 422, which is more than fine. I hardly ever shoot 8K anyways because of the file size, and I mostly do 4K 60p on my original A1. But it would have been nice to have seen at least one spec bump here. 8K 60p maybe? I don't know. Push the boundary a little bit, you know what I'm saying? But again, it's more than fine. Okay, moving on. Just a bunch of features that got carried over from the other cameras, so if you know what they are, you know what this is. We have the ability to now import and display custom LUTs on the A1 Mark II, something that I wish they would have given us in a firmware update for the original A1. I can forgive them on the no AI autofocus, but displaying custom LUTs in video? Come on, Sony, I know you can do it. We also have two new stabilization options, dynamic active and framing stabilizer, and for solo video creators, auto framing and self timer for video recording.
Long recording and overheating?
All right, time for my least favorite section, but we gotta do it. Remember, your results will vary depending on the climate that you're shooting in. Anyways, here are my very Vong results. Starting off with AK30P, 520 megabits per second, 10-bit 422 in the HS codec, we filled up an entire 120 gigabyte card with no heat issues. At 4K 120p in the HS codec, 280 megabits per second, 10-bit 422, we did get a heat warning at around the 30-minute mark, and it shut off just before reaching 34 minutes. Now, in a lot of our 4K 120p tests for other cameras, this is quite typical to get a heat warning and then shutting off. Aside from that one overheating instance, both 4K 24p and 4K 60p in either HS and SI codec chew through the whole 120 gigabyte card, no problem. Here are the results on the screen. Moving on to the more exciting things.
Ergonomics.
We have the 4-axis multi-angle LCD screen. The original A1 only has a tilt-only style screen, which was fine at the time, but was a sore point for folks who prefer the flip-out screen. But since 2022, Sony introduced this multi-angle LCD screen on the A7R5, which made its way to the A9 Mark III and now on the A1 Mark II. It is solid, not flimsy at all, and it's honestly something that I would stupidly upgrade to the A1 Mark II for from my original A1. Not the pre-capture, not the noise reduction composite feature, but the flippin' multi-angle LCD screen. The buttons, they are a lot more squishier, and the double-decker mode dial here is now implemented, making the switch between photo, movie, and slow and quick mode much quicker and easier, which is really convenient as a hybrid shooter. And to all of my Michaels out there, rejoice! The grip is slightly beefier and juicier for your big-ass hands. Unfortunately for me, it is a micro bit too big for me now. I find it hard to reach for the new C5 button here, which by default triggers the continuous shooting speed boost feature. With the original A1, my middle finger could reach the front of the camera, but with the new A1 Mark II, I really have to stretch for it. But instead, I've gone ahead and programmed that feature to one of the lens buttons, so I'm fine. Now, a couple of new accessories are coming with the A1 Mark II, both included with the camera and sold separately. The first being the additional bigger eyepiece, which helps shield light better when using the viewfinder, speaking of which you can now zoom out or rather make the UI a bit further away when you peek through the eye cup, which I like. The second being the official slim dual battery charger, which can charge 2 batteries simultaneously. From 0 to 100%, it will take approximately 155 minutes. It needs to be powered by USB-C power delivery, but it will not come with a USB-C cable nor a wall plug. Probably not going to be a big deal as most of us will already have a lot of these already, but I know somebody's going to say something. Karen.
Yeah, Karen. Price.
$6,500 US, 6,500 buckaroos.
Wow.
Exactly the same price as the original A1 when it first came out, and the A1 Mark II will be available mid-December 2024. Now, before you close out on the video, let me say this. As impressive as the A1 Mark II is, it's only really going to be of service to pros who do a lot of split-second photography. If you don't need the pre-capture, the original A1 will be a bargain when the Mark II hits the market. However, any hardcore Sony users know that 3 is the magic number. Every third iteration of Sony cameras are the best of the best from their own lineup. Don't believe me? A7 III, the first most capable and affordable hybrid full-frame camera to ever hit the market that is still popular to this day. A7S III, the perfected low-light video camera which only got bested by none other than the FX III. A9 Mark III, global shutter, don't need to say more than that. So I think we're gonna see something truly groundbreaking with the future A1 Mark III. But until then, Squarespace is an all-in-one platform to create beautiful websites. No coding knowledge needed. Just simply choose from their many templates and designs. Perfect for photographers and online shop owners. Use my link down below for a 14-day free trial, and when you're ready to launch, you can use my code JASONVONG to save 10% off your first purchase of your website or domain. Guys, thank you so much for watching, and we will see you guys in the next video. Peace.
Thank you, Jason Vong.